Hello and welcome. My name is Whitney and I'm an anesthesia intern documenting my journey as I go through my first year of residency. If you watched my video from last week, you know that I got off of a more difficult rotation working in the hospital, and this week I'm actually doing a bit of a lighter one working in our continuity clinic, which is an outpatient internal medicine clinic. In today's video, I'm just going to go over what exactly I did this week and what a day in the outpatient clinic looks like. And then at the end of the video, I'll go over how many hours I actually worked this week. So let's get into it. Okay, so as a transitional year intern at my program, we have, I think, about 6 or 7 weeks of continuity clinics sprinkled throughout the year. And I just did my second one. I feel like I'm really going to come to appreciate these weeks just because they really are lighter in hours and just not as crazy. And I think coming off of my inpatient internal medicine rotation, I really have come to appreciate the weeks that I have here just because not only is it lighter in hours, but I also just feel like the day itself isn't as stressful, right? Like when you're inpatient, your whole day is kind of focusing around like rounding and just like getting things done as quickly as you can. And it's kind of that way with outpatient, but I would say I didn't feel quite the same stress just because it's a lot more like a go with the flow kind of day rather than the other one where it's just like getting everything done as quickly as you can. I think my favorite part about this rotation is actually my off time being just a little bit more relaxed. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you watched my video from last week, you know that my off time was very structured and I felt like I had to get everything done quickly when I came home. And I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that I like wanted to do. But during this week, I actually had time to like come home and relax and kind of do whatever I want. So that was a really nice surprise and welcome from coming off of a more intense period where I couldn't do that. Okay, so now I'll actually get into like what this week looked like. So for our clinic, we are in clinic Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. And it's a pretty predictable schedule. If anything, you might like come in a little bit after your start time or leave a little bit early, just depending on what time your patient's coming in and how quickly you finish up with everything you have to get done. As I mentioned before, this is an outpatient internal medicine clinic. So you can think of this as just like general medicine outside of the hospital. Some people might know this as like primary care. That's what we're doing essentially. So during our visits, we're working with patients on chronic medical conditions like diabetes or managing their blood pressure or their cholesterol levels. And we're also talking about preventative health, which is actually a really big part of primary care. So we're talking to people about, like when they should be getting their colonoscopy or when they should be getting their mammograms, vaccines. All of these things are what we go over during a primary care visit. I really appreciate how our program has us set up as interns working in the continuity clinic because I still feel like they're kind of easing us into it. On the first week in this clinic, we were paired with a senior resident who would actually go into every appointment with us and like walk us through how to do everything just because it was our first time, not only in the clinic, but for some of us, like working with a specific EHR that they have in the clinic. And now during the second week, I'm not paired with a senior resident, but they're really slowly easing us into how many patients we actually see during our day. So for me this week, I would see one patient in the morning and then one patient in the afternoon. So just 2 patients total. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not really, in all honesty, but I feel like when you're like focusing on not only the patient but like putting in the labs and you're like learning about prescriptions and how to put those in, it's really nice to only have one thing you have to do for a certain block of period or a period of time. So I actually really like that because I feel like not only can I really focus on what I'm doing, but I actually can like learn about the patient and like learn from them as well. So it's actually working out really nicely. On top of that, I would say I felt really lucky because a lot of my patients this week, actually all of them, were pretty straightforward. I know sometimes that these visits can get really overwhelming just because there's so many things that like the patient wants to talk about and that you want to talk about, and you're under like a time limit because of an appointment time that you have. So I know that these appointments can get kind of overwhelming, but that wasn't the case for me with any of my patients this week, which was really nice. This is not something that I'm going to try to get used to because I know that's not the case with primary care visits. I know from my first week that I did this that a lot of times there's a lot of involved patients that just require a little bit more work and effort. when you're working in primary care, and I experienced that the first week, and I saw even my co-interns this week have patients who are a little bit more involved. So it's not something that I'm going to get used to, but I am going to just say that I am thankful that it was overall a pretty nice week. So now to talk about what my day actually looked like and how I would prepare for patient appointments. Now that I've done my second week of this and I have that under my belt, I feel like I have a better understanding and idea of like how to explain it. Just because I did try explaining this in a previous video, but I was still really learning and just kind of like getting hang of things. So now we can go into it in a little bit more detail. Okay, so first thing I do during the day is I pull up the schedule and I actually look through it to see who I'm actually going to be seeing that day. I'm looking at what time they're coming in and why they're coming in. So whenever a patient has a appointment scheduled, the scheduling staff will actually put in a usually like a very general reason about like why they're coming in. So in that area, I'll see something like discuss lab results or like annual wellness visit, right? Like it's a very general sense. But for me, it's really nice to see that because I have a good jumping off point when I start doing my chart review on the patient to figure out like what are they going to want to talk about, and also like what am I going to want to talk about with them. Once I have an idea of why they're coming in for their visit that day, then I'll start chart review on the patient. And all that means is just looking through their previous visits and their notes to figure out like who are they, just like learn about them and their medical conditions. If you watched my video about rounding, you'll know that we call this pre-rounding when we're in the inpatient setting, like actually working in the hospital. In the outpatient setting, we actually call this like chart review. It essentially means the same thing. You're just like looking through the computer to learn about the patient. We just call it different things in different locations. This chart review can take some time just because there's some patients who've been seen at the clinic for like years on end, and this is your first time seeing them. Granted, you don't need to usually look through all of their visits, but you want to look through like the most recent ones. And if they've like seen any specialist, you want to like check on their notes to see like what they said. So it can take a little bit of time if the patient is established, but if it's a new patient, usually it goes pretty quickly because there's usually nothing there. So you're kind of going into the appointment blind of like, who is this person? Like, what medical conditions do they have? What do we need to talk about? So it's a little bit different, but you try to gather as much information as you can before the appointment because that usually makes the appointment itself go smoother and a little bit easier. Ideally, we wouldn't be seeing new patients every time we're on continuity clinic, right? Like, since it's continuity clinic, you usually try to see the same patients or like you want to. So far, it hasn't worked out that way on my first 2 weeks of doing that. Maybe it will as I get further into the year. But I can just say this first two times that I was on this rotation, I was not seeing the same patient. So every patient was new for me, which is good. Like it's more experience and, I get to like see different things. So that is kind of nice in a way. But there's also a plus side to like seeing the same patient in multiple visits because you can actually like follow up with them and see how they're doing. Okay, so getting back to chart review. Much like when you're pre-rounding, there's like things you want to look for when you're chart reviewing. You want to figure out like their medical conditions, what surgeries have they had, have they been like hospitalized before for any reasons, on any medications, right? Like you want to get a very general picture of like who the patient is. I'll say it doesn't feel quite as in depth as when you're inpatient. Like when you're outpatient, you want to know these things, but I feel like it's just like good to have those in the back of your mind and not so much things that you actually like have to act on, which is nice. As I'm going through the patient's past visits and everything like that, I'm also actually multitasking and working on just drafting a note. So I usually do this in like a Word document with like no patient identifiers or anything like that. But essentially all I'm doing is like listing out what I want to talk about with the patient. So as I'm chart reviewing and I'm looking at like what their medical conditions are, I'll like put that in my draft of a note because I need to like check in with those things potentially if the patient brings them up. I'm also, when I'm drafting the note, like putting in the reason for visit. So if it's like wanting to discuss medications after like starting it or, like whatever it is, I put that in the note as well, just because it's really nice where, for us, because like we can actually bring our laptop into the room. So as I'm talking to the patient, I can reference the note to make sure that I'm like covering everything that I want to discuss. And I can also start like just very generally typing it and writing it out. I am definitely not like focusing on writing my note. I'm just writing like the bare minimum with like a word or two here and there, just so I have an idea or I can like remember what we talked about after I'm done with the visit. So for me, I do that multitasking as well. And it's really nice because it helps, I think, the visit go more smoothly, but also with just time management of wanting to get everything done quickly. I feel like that works out really well too. Another thing that I will put into my little drafted note for every single patient we see or that I see, doesn't matter like what age, gender, or even why they're coming in, I will make sure that I put in the preventative medicine that we talked about earlier in the video, in terms of like what preventative medicine that this patient needs. So I think that's a huge part of primary care, and especially as someone who's like learning in this setting, is I really want to focus on like knowing preventative medicine in terms of like what age do we start colonoscopies or like mammograms, like when are vaccines needed for like different age groups, or like depending on age, like fall risks and assessments, right? Like there's all these things that are a part of primary care that I feel like are really important to learn. And this is like my chance to do it, right? Like I'm not going to really cover this in any other area while I'm in my intern year. So it's really important for me to be focusing on that while I'm in the clinic. And it's really nice because with my program, they actually like made a list for us of like what we're expected to ask each patient. So for me, I just like have that saved on my computer and I just like copy paste that into every note. So I don't miss it for any patient anytime. And I feel like that's like a really nice system that I'm hoping works well throughout the year, just because there are really important things that I don't want to miss for each patient encounter. I had to adjust the camera a little bit. It was getting really bright behind me, so I had to change positions a little bit. But that pretty much covers everything that's involved with chart review on a patient. I feel like I really like the system that I have down now just because it really helps me organize my thoughts before going into an appointment. And I think it makes me a little bit more confident that I've thought about what I want to talk to the patient about. And I have a way of recording what we do talk about. And also, if the patient brings up anything else, I feel like it's an easy way for me to like write that down so I don't forget it later on. When I'm talking to the patient, I am going over those points on my own note, and I'm also listening to like what they want to talk about as well. So I'm documenting all of these things down so I can prepare to present it to the attending once I'm out of the room. So yep, I'll like talk to the patient, then do the physical exam, and then I'll leave the room and then go talk to the attending physician and just discuss the patient and go over what I figured out and what the plan is for them. As an intern, the attending physician will actually go back into the room with me and talk to the patient, just because we are so new at everything that they need to be involved in that step. But yep, that is pretty much the finishing step with the patient. The attending just goes in and talks to them, and then after that, we'll both leave. I'll put in labs and whatever else the patient might need, like a referral or something like that. And then once I'm done with that, I'll actually walk the patient out, and they will schedule their next appointment. And that is pretty much the flow of what it looks like to be working on or working in an outpatient clinic. Once I'm done with that, it's really on me to just like finish the note. And once I have all of that done, I'm done for the day. So that is all that I really have to say about the outpatient clinic. Now we will go over how many hours I actually worked this week. All right, so I'll go ahead and pull up how many hours I actually worked this week. I'll just bring them up here. Yep, and so you can see it was a shorter week with just Monday through Thursday. And even though it's scheduled from 8 to 5, you really just come in before your first appointment and give yourself as much time as you need to get what you have to get done before seeing them. So I think like Monday, my first patient was at like 10 a.m. or something. So I didn't come in until like 8:30 just to give myself like ample time. I had like plenty of time to get through everything. And then, I just did the same for the rest of the week. And I got to leave as soon as I had everything done, which is really nice because I got to leave early 3 of the 4 days. So, yeah, only working 33-ish hours this week was definitely a welcome change from last week. So, yeah, I really think I will come to appreciate these weeks throughout the year. So, we'll see how that goes. All right, well, that is all that I have for you guys today. I just want to say thank you again for coming along with me. Next week, I am starting my emergency medicine rotation, so it'll be something completely different, and I will just get back to you on how that goes. Until next time, take care.